used to say it was like being strapped to a freight train and being on the front. You couldn't get off. I realized the company was starting to become quite successful, and I saw people around me, including yourself, talking about exits. I started to think, wow, what if one day I actually sold this thing? It was a very challenging, actually, because I struggled a little bit with my purpose. I had a pretty hard landing, and that was a landing that, actually took me a bit to recover from. I think getting your payouts from exiting a company can be quite anticlimactic. You kind of mentally exhausted a little bit. So when the amounts hit the bank account and all of that, I almost really didn't know what to do with them. And I think one of the things the leader, the founder, is
I'm Josh. Welcome to this Two Commas, the podcast where we discuss exits, and not just exits, but seven-figure plus exits. And today we have with us a man that has a great story behind him, and also a man of many facets and traits, as you're probably guessing from the attire that you're going to see that Matthew is wearing with us today. So I'm really excited to have on the show Matt Chapman. Matt's a good dear personal friend of mine, and he's got a fascinating journey and a great story to share with us today. So, hey, Matt, really absolute pleasure to have you here. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Josh. And it's a very special friendship because you were one of the very first people I met when I moved to New Zealand from Singapore.
Yeah, what a great history we've got. So I always like to start the conversation with a bit of a backstory. And so this is a bit of an insight for the people that don't know who Matt Chapman is, into kind of some insight into your origins and kind of where you came from before getting into business and the founder journey.
Yeah, well, let's see what you dug up.
Yeah, well, I know you're from Australia.
Yes,
So,
that's true.
yeah.
That's true. I always
trained
try to hide that, but it's true.
Trained as an accountant, practicing as an accountant in Sydney. I'll let you take over the story from there.
Well, I was born in a small country town in New South Wales called Muswellbrook, and my father was in coal mining. He was an engineer, and my mother was a housewife, so they were 23. And I think when I was growing up, Muswellbrook, this small town, was all I knew. That was my world. And I, at the age of 16, I went on an exchange to Sweden through Lions, and when I went out into the world, it blew my mind. And when I came back to Australia and completed my last year of school in Muswellbrook, I got a scholarship to go to Sydney. Wow. And that was with Deloitte. And I was 18, so I did night school. I worked during the day in their tax team. And Sydney was a huge change to me from Muswellbrook. And in my last year of university, I went to Canada on exchange, and that again blew up my world. And I came back, moved to Melbourne, and then within a few years, I was in Singapore at the age of 25. Wow. So that little boy from Muswellbrook became very different by the time he was in his 20s.
It's unusual for someone from a rural part of the world to have those opportunities at a relatively young age to go and travel. So have you pondered, no doubt you have, the impact that that experience had for you, and how it shaped the person that you are today?
Yeah, I think that, I often look at people in remote parts of the world or underprivileged families. Not that I was in an underprivileged family. I had loving parents and a happy childhood. But the breaks that I got really defined who I became. And I think that whole analogy of like a frog jumping from lily pad to lily pad is very much representative of my life.
Beautiful. So when you arrived in Singapore, you were in the accounting game. You were still practicing as an accountant, I believe. Is that correct?
So I actually trained as an accountant through university. So when I graduated at the age of 22, and when I came back from Canada and was sent to Melbourne, I was already 4 years ahead of my peers because Deloitte and the cadetships had taken us really from high school, and our friends would bum out on the university lawns, and we'd go to work. And so by the age of 22, I decided, you know what, I don't really want to be an accountant. And I went into recruitment. And when I went into recruitment at the age of 22, which was for a company, Morgan & Banks, which no longer exists, but certainly was the nursery for a lot of accomplished recruiters that would come out of there, I focused on accountants. Okay. And I then went to Singapore, focusing on accountants. And my love of Asia really came from traveling. I had been to Nepal and Borneo, and I just thought, you know what, I really, really feel like there's something in Asia for me. And I was very, very drawn to that. So I showed up in Singapore at the age of 25 with one suitcase, and the rest is history.
Yeah, wow. Hey, so you trained and certified as an accountant. You'd practiced over the period of time that you were studying, so you had your CA, I'm imagining, as well at that point. And so recruitment's not a orthodox choice for someone who has become like has a professional trade. I consider accounting, like law, a professional trade. And so what was it that, and it ultimately became the industry that has defined a pretty big chunk of your career. So what was it that attracted you as a 22-year-old numbers person? I presume, were you financial accounting or management accounting, or kind of
I was
in the
actually
middle?
tax accounting.
Oh,
I was
wow.
actually tax accounting.
That's-
And funnily enough, I actually didn't complete my chartered accountancy. I actually did my CPA, which was
Okay.
a little bit more rounded. But what I found about recruitment that really attracted me, it was a hybrid of many things I liked. And so I think the analytical mind was able to then match with psychology, with marketing, with sales. And so using those skills, but still applying it through the accounting profession, gave me credibility, but also allowed me to learn fast. And so I had great mentors, and I became a high achiever at a young age, which was great for my confidence. But then when I went to Asia, I completely started again. And I think this is another theme of my life, has been a lot of, probably like yours, Joshy, has been a lot of reinvention.
Yeah, that's a subject that I'm really keen to dig into later on. I think, as we spoke about yesterday, this is probably going to be like a 3-part conversation.
Yes.
So we're establishing the groundwork here. So just before we talk about the start of ChapmanCG, which has been a big part of your life up until quite recently, you mentioned that you became quite a high achiever early on in your days in recruitment. What do you put that down to, and what did you do that set you apart from others?
I think apart from having great mentors, I was a lot younger than everyone else. I was very hungry, and so I learnt the formula, which I think in recruitment was talking with a lot of people,
Right.
and really learning the art of matchmaking, if you like, so that those that you met you could actually utilize for opportunities, and then of course. And it's funny talking to you about this because this is also your own world, but the accuracy with which you can do that defines your success. And so I think at a young age, I went from this boy in Muswellbrook to being 23 years old and having a BMW.
Yeah, wow.
And then at 24, I had an apartment in a beachside suburb in Melbourne. But, I realized when I was traveling in Asia that the BMW and the apartment wasn't really me. And when the opportunity came up to go to Singapore, I sold those things and completely started again. And I think life is interesting where sometimes we get a start at something, but something's not quite right, and then we need to pivot, and then we need to get it right.
Yeah.
Interestingly, when I got to Singapore, probably one of the happiest times of my life. Singapore's predominantly an expat destination, but as a 25-year-old, I wasn't an expat. And so my friends were others like me who'd chosen to go to Singapore. We didn't have much money. We'd spend our weekends traveling in exotic places and coming back and working. The reality is I found recruiting accountants in Singapore very, very hard. I was put into a patch next to an extremely high achiever, a lady called Carolyn Poe, who I've lost contact with, but she's a legend in Singapore. And so I got the dregs of the accounting patch in Singapore. But sitting by us was a lady focusing on the human resources profession. And I used to listen into her calls, and they just sounded really interesting. And she always seemed to have a lot of work. And unfortunately, Singapore didn't work out for her. And when that patch became available, I put my hand up to do it. And I had to justify it to my bosses on the back of no experience, but that was the best decision of my life. And from there onwards, it was all steam ahead.
As you've alluded to, we've both spent some time, reasonable chunk of our careers in recruitment and executive search. And one one of my early lessons, just picking up on the point that you made, was that when I was working in London, because we've kind of been entered in a pretty similar age and stage actually, and also trained as an accountant. I don't talk about it terribly much these days, but
I forgot that you were an accountant.
yeah, right. So very, very similar backstory. And so the company that I worked for, Eden Brown, had a phone league. There was 50 consultants in there, and they literally published each month the people that spent the most time on the phone. And then they correlated that with the amount of billings. And there was a direct correlation. It was actually causation. And so, kind of the number was about 1,000 minutes a month of outbound calls that you were endeavouring to kind of hit. And if you could get there, then you'd reach Trevor Parsons' kind of levels of billings, which I can't recall the numbers, but in today's dollars, it'd be well over $2 million a year of billings, phenomenal amount of production that individual and the people that were up in the high levels could do. So there was a really strong correlation between amount of work, amount of conversations that you're having, and the success that you had. And it's like anything, the more that you do of it, the more you practice at something, the better that you get. So you had this great success in Melbourne, and you went to Singapore, and you kind of fell a little bit flat, and it was hard. And you decided to pivot into HR. But I'm just curious about the lessons and the things that you may have made that mean. Because as a relatively young person, I don't know about you, but when I was 25, I was kind of full of a bit of bullshit and bravado. And I was my own biggest fan and occasionally my own biggest critic. And so when I had those moments of being smacked down, it was quite hard, but it was also really formative. So what was that experience like for you, and being the big man in the office, to turning up and then kind of struggling to get it together?
Look, it was very hard, and I really threw myself into the fun parts of my life. So I enjoyed running, and I would do marathons, and then I got into ultra marathon running, and ultra marathoning introduced me to a type of person that was very different to what I was seeing in business. And I was also very social. I enjoyed connect. Singapore's a melting pot of fascinating people, and it really suited me well. But I also had a bit of a personal crisis as well, because when I first got to Singapore, I also came out. And so I dealt with my sexuality, and that was incredibly complicated for me because it sort of got caught up in my work. And I still remember discussions with my bosses and all that of that transition and all the support that I got with that. And in fact, I didn't even want to stay in Singapore. I wanted to go somewhere like New York.
Right.
And so the company took an interest in me and said, well, look, we'll move you to New York if you want to. But during that time, I also met my partner, who I ended up doing business ventures with in the future, and we'll get onto that shortly.
Yeah, cool. Well, let's transition across to that. So you decided, at what point did you decide to leave the firm? So you left Morgan & Banks in Australia, you worked for a Singaporean-based firm, and at what stage did you decide to go off and set up your own first venture?
So I moved into the human resources portfolio, and from the very first moment that I started talking with HR leaders, I'd found my spot. And I just found the people so fascinating to get a sense of what companies were really like on the inside, because the HR person is obviously, in a perfect world, the right hand of the CEO. And so it gave me a very interesting insight. But what I also learned about HR people is that they're quite interested in their own careers. So therefore, everyone had this duality. They were potentially looking to build a team, and they were also looking for their next job. So I literally had thousands of coffees with HR leaders, and I became very successful in Singapore. And before you knew it, I was promoted to a manager. In my late 20s, I won Consultant of the Year for Asia, and the company also sponsored me through all of my ultra marathons, which was the hottest, coldest, windiest, and driest deserts in the world. So I remember just really being on cloud nine. Life was pretty good, but it was around 2006, and I'd met my then partner, and I just had this feeling that I wanted to do my own thing. And he had a complementary skill set to me. And I resigned from the company, which was then known as Hudson. My bosses didn't want me to leave, so we agreed that I would get a 6-month sabbatical. And then I came back, and they actually sent me to Japan. And so went to Japan, worked there. They hired my partner into the business. But again, I realized, you know what, I want to do this company. And then I got courted by another company to come back to Singapore, an Australian company, to run their operations. We both got hired. And then again, it was like, we need to do this.
Right.
So it was now 2008. So I guess it's so fascinating how you can have an idea, but sometimes it can take a few false starts to get to that point. So we started ChapmanCG, I think on the 10th of April, 2008.
Yeah, and that was a really interesting time because in August, I think it was August the 24th, Lehman Brothers collapsed. And I remember that because I was in London on my first overseas trip, having started my first business 4 years earlier on. And it was my first kind of, defined extended period of time away. And my joke was that I'm responsible for the GFC because I left the office.
Yes.
Yeah, because I was in Europe. I was at the back end of my trip on the tube on the way back to Heathrow.
So we're talking the same time here.
Yeah, same sort of time frame. But 2008 was interesting because the world was starting to show signs of some pretty severe kind of financial distress and some things that had some poor decisions and some poor instruments that had been created. And so you decided to go and leave the safe folds of a business with all the stuff going on in the background. And then I don't know what Singapore was like in 2009. We'll get to that. But in New Zealand, it was the it was annus horribilis. It was a horrible year in 2009.
Yep.
So we were deferred. So I know that there was that itch that you needed to scratch, like metaphorically, you needed to get out and kind of do this thing for yourself. But did you reflect upon the timing and go, this is a good time because it means that there's going to be, I'll have to run a lean operation? Or was it just, I just need to go and do this thing? What was the thing that made you kind of go, now is the moment, despite what's going on in the world?
Yeah, I think I was following my emotional trajectory more than anything else, but it was just time, and we seized the moment. We had a mortgage on our first apartment in Singapore. We gave up 2 salaries, and from day one, we focused. So ChapmanCG, named after me, the Chapman Consulting Group, named after the Boston Consulting Group, we thought it sounded sexy, was a company that was well ahead of its time. So we started it as a HR search firm, which meant that we only focused on HR leaders. And we started it from Singapore, but we called it an Asia Pacific search firm. So we thought, look, the heads of HR sit in Singapore or Hong Kong. We'll work with them and we'll build their HR teams across Asia. My ex-partner had a complementary skill set to me. We hired an assistant who was actually my assistant from before, her husband who ran the database. And the company was actually virtual from day one, which was very unconventional because back in 2008, technology wasn't what it was today. And I think the driver for me was I wanted to have a good life. My time ultra marathoning out in the deserts had taught me that freedom was really important to me. And I still remember the first month that we started the company, we actually toured Europe from Paris to Croatia. And I remember catching the internet on ferries and calling into my assistant in the morning in Europe. And that was the start of us having the lifestyle we wanted. So for me, the desire to create a company was very much like the combination of lifestyle and, I guess, trajectory of business potential.
Yeah. And so you then kind of leaned right into the growth of the business and, really kind of turned it into what it became over time, which was a true global HR search firm. Talk me through some of the critical kind of inflection points that happened. What I find in people's journey is that it really is the trajectory like that. It's never a 45-degree angle up and to the right. You'll have these periods of extreme growth and then you'll have to consolidate for a period. There might be some things that don't go your way, loss of a contract, loss of a key resource, whatever it might be. So talk me through some of those inflection points in the growth and then we can kind of move on to start to talk about the process of acquisition.
So ChapmanCG grew very, very fast from the start, and we were focused. We worked 6 days a week, and I followed a formula, which was meet as many people as possible, put as many people forward for jobs as possible, look after everyone as good as possible, keep everyone connected, through good communication, which in those days was no social media. It was a newsletter. We would have networking lunches, which we used the Singapore Cricket Club. Eventually, we had clients host those lunches, but we began a formula of just baking the cake. And I still remember at the end of the first year, we looked at the bank account and we had $1 million in there.
Wow.
And we hadn't drawn a salary, and we couldn't believe that we had $1 million in there. So we started the firm from Singapore, and we had experience in Japan, where we'd both been living before. But very soon we had searches on across Asia. It was the GFC, so it was tough. But the thing was, we really got used to it. Mm-hmm. So we tuned out what was going on across other companies, and we just went for it. And then before you knew it, it was 2011, and things started to unthaw. And then the firm just went to the next level.
Yeah, wow.
And all those relationships that we had just yielded green shoots. And so that was really the first inflection point for the company. I remember we were in the south of France attending a family wedding, and we were just locked in our hotel room, and it was very miserable, and I thought I was going to implode. And that was when I realized that it was really time to look for my mini-me. And the mini-me would be the person that really helped leverage, I guess, my potential as the main founder, and then start to scale a team. So from then onwards, we started to really build the company. That was never the intention. We didn't have a goal. And I also took on board a international president, and we started to call the firm a global HR search firm. And that's when we started to define the mission that we're going to be the top HR search firm in the world. And that became a reality.
That's really interesting. So there's a couple of kind of success factors that I'll just call out there because I think it's worthy to highlight these things. You're clearly a hustler, a hard worker. I mean, that's a term of respect for me, and I think most people in an entrepreneurial space view that as being an admirable trait. So you really leaned into things based upon a methodology that you'd built which would enable the firm to grow. You had some unique things from the outset. So you had the visibility of doing things Asia Pacific wide at the beginning, and then you moved into being a global firm. You had a formula for success. You did things in a way that others weren't doing. So you had a virtual team firstly. You communicated with people regularly through a newsletter, and when we were just off camera before this conversation, you said that you've been on that side of the table more than you have on this side because you were doing podcasts before there were podcasts, interviewing HR leaders and then distributing that around to your network of people. So there was a whole lot of things that you were doing which were really innovative given the time. And so one of the consequences of that, and you've said to me that everything's on the table, so I'd love to unpack this, is the growth that you experienced. It was kind of almost stratospheric once you got to a certain point, and then the profitability of the firm as well. So can we kind of delve into those things a little bit more, please, Matt?
Yeah, I think I was, very much a chameleon, jumping into all sorts of situations at the front end, winning searches, and at the back end, building processes and recruiting my own people. And so that agility, I think, meant that I saw things from all sides. But at the end of the day, my name was on the door. And so therefore, from a credibility perspective, I wore this badge that essentially meant that we had to deliver. Yeah. So I think creating an organization that had very high standards and ethics, particularly in the HR space, because people are unforgiving, very relationship savvy, very connected, meant that I felt like I was tested from all angles. But I think the thing that really stood apart was I loved what I did. I was passionate about HR. I was passionate about relationships, and that made it easy. And so I think the challenge was when you get stretched like the octopus across so many different areas, that's when you can start to pull apart at the seams. So I struggled with stress and anxiety. I struggled with my well-being, but I used sport, my running, and fitness and travel to somewhat medicate myself to be able to cope.
Yeah. You mentioned, I'd just like to pick up on that point about hiring a mini-me and a global president. Often I observe and have seen others that go through this journey, and that replacement of themselves hire or the supplementation of themselves hire is often the hardest one they have to do. So how did that journey go for you at the outset, and what made it work or not work?
Look, I've always enjoyed developing really good people, and I get a buzz out of watching something that was my capability leveraged through others. And I also enjoy watching them grow into leaders as well. And I think this was something that I really studied via HR leaders, was how do organizations build capability? How do organizations function? So often when I was talking to an HR leader, I'd be assessing them, but at the same time, I'd be understanding, how they're running their team, how the organization is functioning as well. So it was fascinating to be studying the profession, but also using that to actually shape your company. Yeah. And at the same time, not having a clue what you're doing and not following any roadmap for that as well, which meant constant experimentation, constant trial and error.
Yeah. And the other thing that was interesting to me is that you mentioned that you didn't have a specific objective or a goal for a period of time in the company. And that's so counterintuitive and counter to what everyone will tell you about success. And so I would kind of from the outside say it's a mix of drive, determination, curiosity to see what you could do with the company, to see what you're capable of achieving. What else would you say would be the things that enable you to build such a great business when it wasn't necessarily like a blueprint that you were following?
Yeah, so I think once the business took off, I used to say it was like being strapped to a freight train and being on the front. You couldn't get off. And so I would look at quarters, and there'd be 4 quarters in a year. So all I could see was the next quarter. And one of the smartest decisions I made was hiring a heavyweight chief financial officer. And he came from the previous company that I worked for, and he was ahead of his time, but the moment I could just throw the money side to him, even though I was an accountant, managing money has never been a passion of mine. So the company also really grew when he got involved. So I think you can see with me, although there was myself and my ex-partner as the founders, it was the other key pieces I put in that really helped the company explode. And I think for me, I was always just stepping out my life at the same time. So in 2010, I got involved in an amazing project off the coast of Singapore with a series of investors creating a island resort, which released in 2017. It's now very famous. And that allowed me to have a project that was outside recruitment. I also co-founded another generalist recruiting company and a background checking firm. And these were opportunities that came to me through situations where it just made sense to get involved in them. But I think the biggest thing that focused me was buying a farm in New Zealand. And that was 2012 that I found Parihoa. And so once Parihoa came into the picture, I looked at my bank account and went, oh my God, I just really, really want that farm. And that farm engulfed all of the profits that I'd made to that point in time, and it went into that farm, not a cent left over.
Yes. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, because let's talk about the acquisition journey now. So we'll transition into that. So you're running a global search firm. The profit numbers were astounding. If you don't mind me mentioning, it was kind of you're running at about 40 to 50% on revenue, your EBIT margin. It was absolutely unbelievable. And you mentioned that one of the things was the virtual workforce. You also had an approach around diversity and hiring alternatively abled people as well. And so you had a workforce that was just so far ahead of its time in so many respects. And so you were running this wonderful firm, had a really strong presence, possibly the dominant player in that particular market globally. So I'm guessing that you got approached on a pretty regular basis to consider going up for sale. Is that correct?
Unfortunately not, actually.
Ah.
And when I say unfortunately not, I'd never really thought about selling the company. I think I was just too much in the trenches, just building it, steering the ship. But as we moved, so I started the company in 2008. As we moved into sort of 2013, 2014, 2015, it was starting to become quite profitable. And, I think as the founder, you take your draw after everyone else is being paid. And the dividends they started to pile up, and I wasn't really concentrating on them, but I realized the company was starting to become quite successful, and I saw people around me, including yourself, talking about exits, and I guess I started to think, wow, what if one day I actually sold this thing? And so I think that's what started to crystallize the future, which was, as I was hiring my own team, and paying them salaries and bonuses, I also had to retain my people. So the storytelling aspect of where we were going became very important. And so I think I started to retrofit this into the mix as to, where are we going? But I think we had a market intelligence structure in ChapmanCG, which was predominantly comprised of people with disabilities, purely because those individuals could safely work at home. And so we really hired on intellectual ability and cultural fit, but we had exceptional retention, and we really created a model which was very, very efficient. And it was a number of factors coming together, but it really produced a lot of stability in the company. And I think a virtual company back then was very unusual, but even to this day, I still attest a lot of benefits to virtuality. The most important being when people are truly happy in their work and their life at home, they seem to perform really, really well.
Yeah, that's a really good observation. So roundabout, you mentioned 2015, 2016, company's super profitable, doing really well. You're spending more and more time at Parihawa in New Zealand as opposed to in Singapore. And so how did the acquisition talks start, and what was the path to market to experience those conversations?
So I said I co-founded another company that was a company called Beith Chapman, which then merged with a company in Sydney called Ethos. And the co-founder of that company actually took that company to market, and the Japanese company Will Group was the acquirer. And when the M&A expert came over from Sydney to Parihawa for me to sign the paperwork, I still remember he had a Necker Island T-shirt on, actually, and I became very curious why he had that, and I would end up at Necker Island with Richard Branson the next year. But what I started to realise was actually this guy would be an avenue to potentially me selling the company. And so he introduced me to Will Group, and I actually ended up at Necker Island with the founder of Will Group, and we came very close to sale, but unfortunately it fell over, and I didn't sell the company. So
which year is this?
2017.
17. Okay. What happened? Why didn't the deal go through?
So they weren't ready to buy the company, and maybe I wasn't really ready to sell it. But what happened was 2018, I really went back to the drawing board, and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to keep on growing this company. My co-founder had checked out by that stage. The company had close to 90 people. It was a pretty big ship, everyone working across the world in different countries. And I just put my head down on, I was the chairman by 2018, so I had co-CEOs. I put my foot down on the vision, and collectively we actually doubled the size of the company in 2018.
In 1 year?
In 1 year. And I remember that was also the year that I went to Burning Man. It was a year that I was sitting in New York over the summer. New York was one of the places I loved going for business, and I really just didn't have anything to do. Everything was running itself. All my companies, the island was now open. And I thought to myself, you know what? This feeling is not going to last. I really need to act on the fact that this is almost like the eye of the storm. And I went back to the Japanese and said, listen, I know you didn't buy it last time, but let's let's talk. And they bought the company.
Yeah, wow.
And so we signed the deal. I think it was like the 29th of January 2019. They bought 50% of the company, and that was the beginning of the end.
Talk us through the preceding bits before the January 2019 signature on the contract to pass over 50% of the company. So I'm curious about that journey from we on Necker Island had the conversation, didn't end up with a sale and purchase. You then went away and doubled the scale of the asset. I'm presuming both top and bottom line. So it was a markedly different asset than what it was before that. So talk us through the kind of process that Will Group went through to go, let's formalise this thing properly, and what that emotional journey was like for you.
So the first time that we entered into acquisition talks, I found it quite exciting but daunting, because I thought, wow, I could actually sell this. And you go through this emotional roller coaster. There was a number of trips to Japan. The Will Group all spoke native Japanese. We'd be using interpreters. Even when we went to Necker Island to see Richard, and I was there with a group of entrepreneurs, and we took the Japanese with us, and I had my ex-partner who was the co-founder. We weren't really speaking then, but he was also fluent in Japanese, so it was a lot of emotion. And I think when it fell over, like a number of times in my entrepreneurial journey, I found myself, pretty much lying on the floor. But then I got up, and I think the great thing is when something doesn't work the first time, when you go into it the second time, you've got a lot of experience. Yeah. And so the second time, it flowed very well. And I used my CFO to do a lot of the administration. Obviously, this is a virtual company that we had. The Japanese company that was acquiring us had never acquired a virtual company. So therefore, they were suspicious on a number of fronts. So, really, I didn't really expect it to come off. And when it finally did, I was hugely relieved. But I think as a founder, you have to manage your energy well.
Yeah, definitely. So let's unpack those deal terms a little bit, if that's okay. So my first question is, what was it that attracted Will Group to ChapmanCG? I'm guessing by the sounds they bought human resource and human capital companies. Is that what the business that they were in as a group?
Yeah, so they were a Japanese company that was wanting to diversify internationally, and they bought, I think it was 9 companies over the course of several years, ChapmanCG being the largest of those. And what they were interested in was the HR global network. I think I played a big role in the charisma of what we had created and why it was special. Yep. I think the founder of Will Group really resonated with that. So we had a very strong value connection, but we also needed to really define that it wasn't just about me, because he looked at it as like, Chapman-san, is this all about you? And not just that, you hide away in New Zealand, like what are we buying here? So you really needed to professionalize it, and we had entities or people in countries where we didn't necessarily have entities. We had to tidy everything up. But the great thing was we kept a clear head, and we got it into the shape they wanted, and they were very proud to buy this company. The company doubled in size from when we started the sale to the end.
Yeah.
And I had an earnout. So the earnout was initially poised to be 1 year if we could hit a certain target, but we didn't, and that pushed it over 2 years. And then because of COVID, we actually extended it a further year. So it took me till 2022 to exit the company.
Yes. Okay. So I'll just recap some of those things and just dig a little bit deeper, if that's okay. So deal was signed at the start of 2019, and there was a 1 year earnout that was attached, and the intention was to reach a certain level of growth. So I'm guessing it was maybe 50% growth, or whatever that number may have been. I remember you saying at the time that there were some changes that you had to make in the team to kind of make sure that happened, but then it looked like you were going to fall short of it. And at that moment, you had decided to step back in a greater operational capacity as well?
It was really tricky because I had a great team and I had co-CEOs. And when I sold the company, I made one of those individuals the CEO. And I needed to then, stay in the background. I had other ventures that I was concentrating on at the same time, but I also needed to focus on this. So where I put myself was a lot in client relations and marketing. I wanted to try and make myself useful. So I was doing searches. I was running networking lunches. I was writing content, and then I was also just really trying to keep the company stable. So I was doing jiggery with with employees in terms of keeping everyone motivated without sort of overtly doing that. It was a very challenging actually because I struggled a little bit with my purpose. And at the same time, I also engineered myself a role onto Will Group's new entity, which was an entity covering the 9 companies that they had acquired. So essentially, I was almost like the head of strategy, technology, marketing. It was like a mixed bag of things, but I essentially built their brand for their future. And so that gave me something to do. I got a salary for that, and it kept me close to the Japanese and the other founders who were also in processes of exiting their companies.
Was that during the time, that 3-year earn-out period, that you had engineered this new role? Yeah, that's interesting.
It was during that time, and we also hit COVID.
Yes.
And when we hit COVID, it's almost like I had a premonition that something was going to happen, and that's why I got out. I started to sell the company because I felt that I felt that ChapmanCG was a fundamentally recession-proof company because we were global, we were cross-industry. Even though we were functionally on HR, we had a very efficient structure. We were virtual. However, when we hit COVID, it was almost like everything was tested, and we had a quarter where the profit was wiped. I certainly panicked. I was in New Zealand. I chose New Zealand over Singapore as my place to be, and I thought I was going to lose all my assets. I thought it was going to evaporate. So, but that again taught me another lesson. And the trick was just to try and remain strong and clear to the finish line.
Yeah. So you essentially created a position for yourself, even though you'd achieved financial freedom. You'd probably be financially free before that.
Yeah. People used to call me the spiritual founder, and that was because I represented the Kool-Aid of what the company was. Yep. And that was something that I was very passionate about, particularly the younger members of the company, the newer members, just to try and make them feel like they were part of something special, because we didn't have a logo on the wall or plush offices. We just had Skype and a database, and but we had very good clients, and we had incredible clients, and I was very, very proud of the quality of work that we had as an organisation that really eclipsed quite often the top search firms in the world. And I think for me it was a sense of huge accomplishment as we would progressively win some of the biggest global head searches in the world. And I could see the evolution of when we had originally been a contingent recruiter to when we could charge big retained fees. Yeah,
it's an amazing story. So looking back upon that process of the journey with Will Group, which was opportunity lost, revisited, won, earn-out not executed the way that you anticipated, leaned in, world went into shutdown, COVID, etc., increased the value of the company over that time. It's quite a storied journey, right? There's a lot of different aspects and facets to it. But looking back on that now, and with the benefit of hindsight, what would you have done differently?
It's a great question, Joshy. I think innovation for me has always been very important. And I think with ChapmanCG, both internally and externally, we were always trying to be ahead of the curve. I feel as though in the later years, we lost some ground on innovation. And I probably would have focused even stronger on management development and leadership development. I think also building your company structure is like putting Tetris blocks in place, and you don't know what you're doing. You're doing the best with what you've got, but in hindsight, I would have made some different decisions on people to make not only my own journey more enjoyable, but for the company to have optimized even further. And I think that's probably my mindset, really. Like, I am someone who, like you, is very, very focused on improvement and optimization. So whilst I was very content and proud with how we performed over my time with the company, there was always a lot of scope to do it better.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that drew us to each other, is the growth being certainly my leading value, and I think it is yours as well. The pursuit of kind of self-improvement, but also improvement of the things that are around you, people, businesses, all that sort of stuff. So 2022, end of 2022, I think it was the start of 2023, the deal had been done and you're out of the company, you're out of the Will Group.
Yeah, so we finished the earn-out on the 31st of March 2022.
22, okay.
And I remember at Parryhoa, my team at the farm, they held a morning tea, and I refused to eat the cake until the 31st of March US time, actually, because New Zealand was a day ahead.
That was the final check
moment. That was the final sort of moment of accountability, because I didn't really believe it was finished. And I wasn't paid the money until I think it was the end of June 2022. Right. What I'd done is put in place a employee incentive scheme. There were various other things to be netted off. So, the ultimate payday didn't come until all that had been put in place. And to be perfectly honest, I think getting your payouts from exiting a company can be quite anticlimactic because it's the reward for getting to the finish line, but you kind of mentally exhausted a little bit. So when the amounts hit the bank account and all of that, I almost really didn't know what to do with them.
Yeah, and psychologically, this is the thing that is really interesting for a lot of folk, that with their first business, their identity is stamped all over that business. And you had your name above the door as well, not just metaphorically, but literally, Chapman Consulting Group. And so talk me through the identity piece and what you made it mean once you'd sold the company, you'd handed the keys over, and you actually literally weren't expected or probably wanted to go into the virtual office again. What was that like?
Look, I really wanted to stay with the company, actually. The problem was I'd put in place the ultimate succession, and my CEO and C-suite had also done a very good job of that. So there really was nothing for me to do in the company. And the Japanese, by that stage, considering we'd been through COVID and they had been through quite a lot of stress through that time, it kind of felt like I had no one really defining my future. And I remember speaking to my friend, who actually was the CEO of the collective group of companies that had been acquired, and I said to him, "Look, I'd love to be your wellbeing officer for the future of all of the companies and do something like really creative." But no one really had the appetite for that after the COVID years, and I didn't even have a farewell, actually, and I struggled with that because I felt like as a founder, I had put a lot of energy into looking after everyone and growing the company. But by the time I finished, I was actually quite burnt out. And I think one of the things the leader, the founder, is that quite often no one's really taking care of you.
No.
And so I had a pretty hard landing, and that was a landing that actually took me a bit to recover from, if I'm honest.
Yeah. I recall that, and thanks for being open on this format as well. I'd like to talk some more about that, if that's okay.
Yes.
So you endeavoured to get a role created inside the Will Group for yourself, despite being very many times independently wealthy. And was that a endeavour to continue to give yourself not just something to do, but when you're the CEO, when you're the founder of a company, you're talking nearly a couple of hundred people, offices around the world, you're important, right? You're really important. And when you sell that thing, that not just the cachet and not the ego, but that needing to be needed by other people, that disappears. And so was creating the role at the Will Group an endeavour to continue to have that sense of meaning and importance professionally?
So what I'd seen through my work, if I just tune out all the entrepreneurialism, I started a company based on something I loved, and that was human resources in the field of people. So getting back to really my passion, what I'd observed as I synthesized the world of human resources was that well-being wasn't necessarily part of the HR role. And I think this hypothesis had been tested quite a lot through COVID, where the role of custodian for the employee didn't necessarily sit just inside the office. It actually took into account, what I call the whole human. And so as I was observing this phenomenon, I saw that there's something beyond HR. And the wellbeing piece didn't necessarily sit with anyone in particular across the organization. Sometimes you might get a CEO or a founder who gets it. Sometimes you might get people in the C-suite. Sometimes you might get HR. So what I wanted to do was I almost wanted to role model what I was seeing. And I thought, what if I could be this sort of imaginary sort of person and put some substance around it and help create more of these roles in companies around the world, because I actually had a lot of global respect through the HR fraternity, but I wasn't from the HR profession, so I saw some potential to do something with that. But obviously, it was a pretty out there idea. But still, to this day, I think there's something in it.
Yeah. I get the notion of what it is that you're talking about, and so we'll come back to talk about that in a second, because I just want to kind of pick up that burnout piece. So, it's early to mid 2022. You've gone through the ringer many times over. You're fatigued. You've lost the identity piece has gone as well. So, what did you do to pick yourself up? Firstly, was it really clearly obvious to you that you were just spent and done and you needed to take some time out?
I think burnout is fascinating because it's like a tidal wave sort of chasing you. And so sometimes it can be right behind you, and then sometimes you can get ahead of it. And so the wave was sort of chasing me, and it was just starting to wash over me. And so I was in New Zealand. COVID had just finished. The first people were hopping on flights, outside the world. New Zealand was a pretty big change for me from being out in the world, but it's also what I'd signed up for. So I was pretty happy to be here at my farm. And but I think I just was quite flat, And I think, to be honest, I went through sort of, such a bit of a meltdown from it. I could barely tie my shoelaces, And so my friends and people around me, they were quite concerned, and really what I had to do was start to smell the roses of what I'd actually created. I had this incredible farm, and I now had land outside Wanaka, but I also had things around the world as well. I had my island up in Asia. I had other companies, I had investments, and it was almost like I had exited this life one and my next life was starting, but it was a bit untidy. And the thought of all these things actually gave me a double dose of overwhelm, because whilst I was in the engine room doing it all, I'd just been buying things, living out my dreams, which were beautiful dreams. However, now I needed to attend to them. So that was a fascinating realization, just to get the opportunity to then live in my life. And what I saw was a lot of stuff that needed simplification.
Yeah. So give us some insight into that journey. So how did you prioritize for those things? And then I'm guessing it's a case of liquidating, selling some of those things, whatever the case may be. But how did you prioritize the importance of those things and establish what was going to be right for you moving forward?
So I took a very simple analytic, was what makes me happy.
Oh yeah, okay,
and,
cool.
And what made me happy was low stress.
Yep.
And I was sitting on boards. I had bankers. I just had a lot of obligations.
Your life was complicated, man. It was really complicated.
It was complicated. I didn't realize how complicated it was. And so I'm living in New Zealand now, the promised land, and I just really went through my inventory of things, and I just sold them, I collapsed things, and I just kept on going and going and going and going. I hopped off the boards, and I just packed everything up. Sold my house in Singapore and my apartment, and I just consolidated my life to New Zealand and as few things as possible. That admin, I think I'm still finishing it off, but I'm just about there.
Right.
And every time I clean up something else, I'm really happy.
Yes. So you essentially Marie Kondoed your life.
Yes.
Yeah. On a grand scale.
And that included cars and
Yep.
and bits of, and listen, some things are not easy to get out of as well. So you couldn't just wave a magic wand over it. But what I wanted to do was I wanted to charge up my energy and really work out my future.
Yeah. There's a couple of things that I'll kind of point out there. It's really interesting. I've made this mistake historically myself. Making decisions based upon a value set that was very important to you at a certain period of time, and then not being reflective and present to what is right for you right now, but also what's right in 3 to 5 years. And that's quite hard for us to do. And so it sounds like you were kind of making all these decisions, making these acquisitions, taking on these responsibilities, giving to a whole lot of different things that you cared about, causes and boards and those sorts of things. Based upon a value set that had been really, really important to you up until probably about 2021, maybe 2022. And then you realised that the value set looking into the future was going to be quite different. And so therefore you needed to deal with the incumbent level of anxiety and stress that was going on, the overwhelm that was around you. And for those that haven't been through this, they're going, oh wow, poor guy, had a huge, phenomenally successful company and exit. And yet he was in this place, but it's a real thing, right? It gets talked about more in Silicon Valley around kind of founder health and well-being, but this is post the thing happening. So getting really reflective and present and clear on what values we're looking into the future, and then just going through a massive Marie Kondo exercise. For those unfamiliar, I think it's the joy, the life-changing joy of tidying up, I think is the name of her book. And it's about your wardrobe, but you did it with your life, whatever makes me happy. And I just love that.
And the deeper you get into your wardrobe, it also makes you feel good.
Right.
I look in there now, there's not that many pairs of socks or undies or shorts or shirts.
No.
I realize a lot of the things I had, I don't wear anymore.
Yeah. This is funny because on a couple of weddings that you attended, you famously turned up in a pair of shorts and a blanket.
Yes.
So you've really simplified.
I happen to take it too far sometimes, but you get the point.
That's okay. So we've talked about MC1, ChapmanCG. MC2 was the kind of tidying up phase. Tell us about MC3.
Whoa. Well, MC3 is just being born.
Okay.
He's just coming out of bubble wrap.
Yeah.
And, MC3 has exited the companies, or exited ChapmanCG. MC2 thought he was MC3, but he's actually still MC2 because he had the next wave of things to do. MC3 is like, right, I'm ready to put on the gas to this thing called life, and I want to be the embodiment of what I believe, which is low stress, happy, not dictated by things and people, and just living out my potential. And the reason I want that is so that I'm a good energy, not just to myself, but to other people. Mm-hmm. So MC3 has really had to come to terms with the fact of just being.
It's a very Buddhist or Taoist kind of view. Yeah. I know you spent a lot of time in Asia, lived there for a number of years, and both of those constructs and philosophies will be very familiar to you. Are they things that you use to kind of govern your life and make decisions with now?
Yeah, I have like everyone, done a lot of healing, but I've healed from my mistakes and my successes. I think we'll be healing to the day we die. But I think being doesn't mean that you can't create more new things or invest in great ideas. It just means that you need to do it with flow. And so through my transition from MC1 to MC2 to MC3, I have spent a lot of time looking at others and working out, what I think is the recipe for success. And I think that in order to be in your true power, you need to be in that kind of zone of genius, which is using your mind for the things that bring great value to everyone, and doing it in a different way to what you've done before. So you don't want to fall back into the one. It's very easy to go back there because you've got all the muscle, you're very good at it, you can multitask, everyone knows you're good at it, everyone wants you to go back to it, but you shouldn't go back there.
Yeah, I totally hear you. So that's kind of bled in from Marie Kondo, I believe she's Japanese, into the Ikigai framework, which I think you'll be familiar with.
Yes.
Yep, what you're great at, what you love, what the world needs, and what brings you joy. I think I've doubled up on those things, but you know it very well. So all of this is like the journey of transformation.
Yes, and it's the idea that we can completely change, right? So everything before us is what's made us into who we are today, and everything ahead of us is a white sheet of paper. So in the short term, we can't change much, but medium term we can change a lot, and long term we can change everything. And I think the big lesson to me has been to build a life of agility, and don't be owned by things, don't be owned by people. You need to just be able to try and channel that flow. So I think where I sit at as MC3 is a big thing that's been fantastic for me has been New Zealand and land, actually. And I'm the custodian of two magnificent pieces of land in the North and the South Island. Parihawa has been really a place that's defined me from 2013 till now. And my land in the South has been an overlapping 5-year journey, and it very much represents the new me, being in the mountains, being in the purity that surrounds Wanaka and just the potential of what that means. And I think Parihawa, I'm very proud to say, has always been a fantastic place for my friends to come and reset and relax, with the beautiful views of the ocean and the landscape. I have my dear friend Fleur, who is helping on the creation of Parihawa as a well-being destination and retreat. And it's such a beautiful place. But at the same time, I'm continuing to go through my transition. So I am putting Parihawa out to the world to channel in, a kindred spirit, my successor for this land. Who knows if they may be a partner that will share it. I'm just putting it out there because holding this big vision when I have two lands is a lot, but we're playing the energy high till the end, and that gives me a lot of purpose because I can just see that land helping others on their well-being, and so really right now at this point in time, that's sort of where I sit.
Yeah. I love the use of the word custodian because I think that too often people get caught up in ownership of things, and especially if you think about land and buildings and those sorts of things. It really is our responsibility to look after and to improve and to care for those things, and that really is the role of custodian, and it's kind of the taonga thing around that as well. So I really celebrate the fact that that's the view that you've taken. I just don't want to move on from the transformation piece just yet because
Yeah.
there's some learning that's
Love
here.
to talk about transformation.
Yeah, cool. So I don't think I know or have met anyone else. There might be some famous people that have been on more of a journey of transformation than you, but you are the single person that I know that's been through
Thank you.
kind of so much of a transitionary journey over the 12 odd years of our friendship. And it's quite remarkable to see from the outside, and also very, it's inspiring. It's inspiring. And so for someone who's watching or listening this, often people feel stuck. So for someone who doesn't really know, they kind of go, I want to move on from this. I want to be able to experience this transformation. Could you give them some tips and some pointers? And maybe it's from the view of what you did, or it's from what you've observed, but just kind of give people some insight into how they could go on a journey of transformation.
Yeah, look, I think transformation comes from the realization that despite outwardly material success or likes or kudos or whatever, that it's not right. There's another place that you want to be, but the journey of getting there is the present. It's the sum of the present and the moves that you make to get to the new you of the future, and that will always be the metamorphosis. It's an ongoing journey. I see like life 1, life 2, life 3. There's these disruption points that are icky. Like it just doesn't all feel right. But I think that you've got to be quite uncompromising in your idealism of what you want. So I'll give you an example. Like, I don't like social media, but I use it. I use Instagram, I use LinkedIn, I use my phone like everyone else. But when I stop using social media, when I put my phone away and just live in the non-tech reality, I feel happier. Now, we can't live like that in 2024 unless we try. So I will try. And similarly around, all of the wonderful things out there that overwhelm us, all the things we say yes to, all the obligations, when you realize that this loop is just going to keep on going and actually it's wearing you out, you've got to start saying no. So, I think that you've just got to be very conscious to work out what's not serving you. And some of those things are very hard. I mean, sometimes they're people. And sometimes you've got to send people off to other pastures away from you, even though you would like them around you. And I think, where are you trying to get to? You're trying to get to peace and sustainability. And if you like, coming to New Zealand from Singapore for me was really the polar opposite. Singapore was an incredibly progressive place. I learned so much from it. I'm a Singapore citizen. I saw an amazing trajectory there, but actually it wasn't sustainable for me. I just wanted to hike in the mountains and, do things that you don't need to pay money for that give you happiness. So I think transformation's a journey. It helps when you surround yourself with others who see the power of transformation. There's a few ideas. I could wax lyrical about this subject. I've still got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I think, at its core, we are not, like, there's no destination in life, because if there was, it'd be death, right?
Yeah.
And so, we've, I think, really both clearly embraced the same notion, which is that I think the purpose of life is actually to realise what you're capable of, and to continue to work on yourself and to improve, and then improve the lives of the concentric circles or the ripples in the pond that surround you. And so I'll just kind of repeat back what I've heard you say. The keep clarity and grounding in why this transformation is important at the outset, and bring no ego to it. You didn't use those words, but that's kind of reading between the lines what I'm hearing you say. Be uncompromising on that. So just have crystal clarity and drive towards that thing, because that's kind of the purpose of it, and your purpose as well. Be clear on the boundaries that you set along the way. Keep present on what is most important in relation to that journey. It's okay to let things go, and that might be possessions, and it might be people as well. and at the core of it all, it's making sure that you've got that kind of view on sustainability and peace as well. I'd probably drop in the word contentment maybe as well. I'm not sure if that's something that you've thought about too.
I think contentment's very important, and what's fascinating with all this is, ironically, money doesn't come into it.
No,
money can actually be a curse. I have many friends who live in vans and have nowhere near what I've got, and they're definitely happier. So I've seen those people. I think money comes with a lot of responsibility. You can also use it to do a lot of good. I'm still on my journey to complete my cycle for that to be an eventuality for my people, my communities, my country, and this is all a journey. But I think the other thing I would say is it's okay to make mistakes. No one's perfect. I've been a jerk to people. I haven't been my best version of myself. I apologize to those that have been the recipients of that. I'm generally a good person. But the thing is, being able to admit your mistakes and grow and to seek forgiveness and all that, I think is really important, because we don't want to resent our actions, and we don't want to have enemies. We don't have enemies. So I do believe in going there and being myself. I've had a lot of strong personalities around me as well, particularly in business or neighbours or different people who, through their wealth or have asserted things on me. It's been very hard, but the thing is, we also have to just accept that everyone's just on their own journey as well. And I think the more I can just center myself, the more I'm able to be stable and think clearly and not contribute to that sort of energy that can go around to make things worse.
Yeah. I was having a conversation with Shane Parrish, a US-based, actually Canadian-based author and podcaster and thinker, all-round good guy, and lucky enough to interview him for Entrepreneurs Organisation, and we were talking about the curse of money as a part of the conversation, and he said, look, I've been lucky enough or unlucky enough, depending on which way you look at, to count a number of billionaires as my friends. And he goes, without calling any names out here, he said they're probably universally the most unhappy people that I know. And unfortunately, that thing, I put a post on LinkedIn a couple of months ago as a part of my book that I'm writing, Entrepreneur, to get a sense of, do people connect more with the fame associated with wealth than with the fame associated with creating? And I said, quick pop quiz, can you name faster 3 billionaires or 3 Nobel Prize winners? Have a guess on the ratio. I had 100 responses, so that's a good, literally 199 responses. So what do you reckon the number was, percentage of people that could name the 3 billionaires versus...
I've got no idea.
Okay, 80% of people said they could name 3 billionaires quicker than they could name 3 Nobel Prize winners. So Alfred Nobel invented this thing back in the 1840s. He'd created dynamite, had the patent to dynamite, became fabulously wealthy through enabling industry, but also a lot of death because that went into the weapons of war that came about. And in his conscience, he created this thing, and it's been all about creators of peace, of a little bit of the arts, of science, of technology, and yet now we favour more billionaires. And I think that it's become this crazy thing where the pursuit of that becomes the most important thing for many people, and the view of that pursuit becomes super, super important to other people. And it's kind of super flawed, right? And it's not the thing that will bring you happiness,
No, and I think the realization for me, I can remember my childhood and, what I grew up in, and, it wasn't the reality that I'm in now. But for me, the financial success, it came from, the abundance came from good service to people, and not just me, but what I had around me. So that's the product of the excellence in that space. I never set out to make loads of money, and I've always remembered that, And when I hear people trying to make money, I mean, my personal view on it is try and do the right things. If you create the right solutions, you will make the money. Easier said than done, but I'm in the privileged position to be able to say that.
Yeah. It's a word that I kind of bring into my vocabulary often as well, and I think it's important to reflect upon that. And the other thing that I would add to that, it's a contrast frame really, is that you worked bloody hard, and you've had to sacrifice a lot of kind of life and time experiences, plus your health and well-being along the way to get to where you are, and that's part of the journey.
And I think this is really, when you talk about MC3, one of the areas that I'm passionate about is how do the creators of new age concepts, particularly people like us who've already, done it, and then for my sake, or in my situation, walk through the fire, how do the next wave of creators create companies with their own well-being at the heart, like as the founder and CEO, and imbue that into the C-suite, make sure that there's a well-being officer and well-being centric company. And you know what, the younger generations coming through, I believe will want to work for these companies. I really genuinely believe well-being is something that we're all seeking more of. No one wants to work for the equivalent of the cigarette packet type company. And I really believe that the whole integration of work and life, and even from a talent perspective, not just what you want to do for work, but what you want to do with your life, is becoming more of a thing. So the concept that I've been working on for some years, and still not there yet, has been the creation of a network just around well-being. And that network is a network of good energy with people who believe in that vision. And for some years, I've been seeing this network as a collective that can change a lot of things. Oh, wow. And I've been trying hard to put it into action. And sometimes I've imagined a new social media platform that's a well-being platform that's non-addictive, that this network hangs around. I haven't been able to create it. I've told a lot of people about it, and a lot of people see it. And sometimes really great brains come closer to me who potentially could create it. And I hope that my legacy is that this collective can create the answer to what I think the future is around well-being. But for now, I'm going to enjoy my life.
Yeah. One should. Do you know AJ Burtonshaw?
No.
Oh, you need to have a chat. I'll introduce you to him, founder of Serato. So
yes.
He's been talking about this same concept,
yes.
The idea of something which enables us to keep in touch socially and network community-wise, and on a basis that will give you events and experiences to be able to kind of get together with people around.
I think it's in the physicality, the events and experiences, and it's how you can have an application that still prioritizes physical interaction. I often joke this is a network anchored by telepathy, so that it's not just about likes and all of that. But I really like to hear the discussion on this, and if anyone listening has ideas and wants a free lunch or dinner or walk at Party Hoa, we're always happy to talk about it. And I think that's what the farm is for us at this point in time. It's just a connection point of good people enjoying well-being and defining the future. Because I do think we live in very transformative times, and I think that humanity is at this inflection point where with AI, with technology addiction, with the world where it sits, there's some real potential problems around mental health. But I do believe, and even as we sit here in New Zealand, we sit in a good place to solve it. It is solvable, actually. We're still the same humans we were before. Yeah. We just need to use the tools a little bit more smartly.
Consciously. Yeah. It's funny, the things that we've created to make our lives better and easier have, in a lot of respects, overtaken our evolution of our brain and our capacity to be able to handle these things. And I completely agree. I think most pundits agree that the next big pandemic that we will see is the mental health pandemic, and we're kind of living in it to a certain extent at the moment. And you and I have both rubbed up against the burnout thing. You probably experienced burnout, and then the kind of other things that are associated around the outside of that. So if someone did have this great idea, how would they find and connect with you, Matt?
Well, they can connect obviously through maybe this podcast, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Matthew Chapman. but it's absolutely an area that we can solve, and I really want to see it solved. And I got to say, as an alien in New Zealand who chose this country from anywhere in the world, I'm very passionate about New Zealand's future as well. Like, I think this application, this concept can be created from New Zealand to the world. This doesn't have to be a Silicon Valley concept. And, I really feel as a country to view this well-being phenomenon, New Zealand's a great place because we're a little bit more backward than some other parts of the world. It's actually why I chose it. I like the way that New Zealand works. When I go to Singapore, super futuristic. Everyone's on their phones. It's very cutting edge. But New Zealand, it still has a bit of what we love about the past.
Yeah,
and I like that a lot.
Yeah, and those simple things are actually a lot of where the satisfaction and the joy of being a human comes from. Be it walking on the grass with no shoes on, to sitting around a campfire with some friends, enjoying a toasted marshmallow or a glass of wine, whatever, just the simple things. And I think that's centered around community to a certain extent. And to a reasonable degree, I think we do maintain that quite well in New Zealand.
We do, and I think there's a big distinction between the North and the South Island as well. And for the last few years, I've been building my home Synchronicity just outside Wanaka, and I now live in it. And I actually don't allow any technology inside the house. It's a zone of presence and analog. And my future house that I'm still finishing off, it'll be very, very much the same as well. And I like to try and set an example to those who come into my environment that we need to slow down. So it's more about hopping into the ice bath or the sauna, or walking barefoot on the grass or whatever. And it's not a joke. It's actually what I try to do to earth myself after so many years of flying around at high speed. I even try and drive between the South and the North Island if I can and I have the time. Today I flew on the plane, but it's just all about this whole idea of slowing down so that you can speed up.
Yeah, I love this. I've got a closing question, which I'm going to come to in a second for you, but it's been a wide-ranging conversation, and we've delved into some subjects quite deeply and some others we've just touched on lightly. Is there anything that I haven't asked you today that you're quite passionate about, that you'd like to get across, or have we managed to kind of get into the levels that you were hoping to for the purposes of this conversation and this audience?
Oh, look, we've covered some wonderful topics, and we could probably talk for days. I am just very thankful that we've been able to connect. Josh, you've been an amazing force in my life. I came to New Zealand knowing no one, and I love this country. I feel very comfortable in it. Despite being born in Australia, I feel that New Zealand has all the best parts, and I certainly feel a Kiwi. But I'm just very thankful for all of the experiences that I've had. Some of them have been extremely hard and traumatic at times, but the great thing is you sit in the present with all those learnings, and I'm very excited by the future. I'm very excited by the younger generation coming through, the ideas and perspectives, that we remain open to that. I love nothing more than mentoring, as I'm sure you do, young entrepreneurs, and just thinking outside the box. And one of the things I love to do to switch off and just have fun is movement, not just running or hiking, but cars and vans, and that's something that we share a passion for.
Absolutely.
But I think you're going to ask me a question of
alternative career. I'm going to get there in just a second. Before I do, thank you for saying that. I'm very touched, and have also really enjoyed the time that we've been able to spend to get to know each other properly, and look forward to that continuing into the future.
Thank you.
And I've always believed that there is the country that you are born in and the country that you belong.
Yes.
And so I think very clearly, in your case, Matt, you were born in Australia, but you belong in New Zealand. And so, Kiwis move around the world, and that's the case. And we have a lot of people that come to New Zealand. I think we're a truly, New Zealand's a country of immigrants. We're all relatively fresh here compared to the birds and the tuatara. So my final question for you is, in an alternate universe, that parallel universe, there's thousands, millions of those universes, but there's another version of Matt that's sitting in one of those universes that has a career of choice that is just the most interesting, fascinating, and the one that you think that could have brought you some deep joy. So what would that career look like?
You know what I'm going to say, and it connects with movement, and it's a car journalist. I would love to be a car journalist. I would love to not just be test driving the fancy smancy latest greatest, but I love the golden oldies, the classics. I love the retro vans. I love nothing more than just clambering into backpackers, setups and looking at how they travel. I'm really quite fascinated by that. So yes. I think my ultimate career would be if you could take a concept like Top Gear and put it in New Zealand and just make it about people's cars and vans and movement, and then follow that and kind of delve into Kiwi culture, the quirkiness of the country, and just film it against the beautiful mountains and all of that. I reckon it would be absolute hit. And that's probably what MC3 should do. But I find all the admin around getting the cameraman and the setup around me, but just the storytelling is a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But like you, Joshy, I really love just getting in the car and just feeling the thrill of speed and
going for a blast.
Yeah, exactly. Need we say more?
Yep. I'll be at the track again in a couple of weeks, so I'll give you the dates for that. Good. It might work.
Yes.
And one of these days I'll get you on a Targa as well, because you'll absolutely love that experience.
Look, it's one of my guilty pleasures from Life One. I have a great car collection, and every one of them is a different aspect of my personality. From my 1969 Pagoda to the old Landies that I have, and they're just fun. And every day I'm thinking about the fact I should sell them all and I should have an electric car or a bike or whatever, but I just can't bring myself to do it.
Just get one of those as well. And then you can appease your kind of green vibe. So just have the Tesla sitting there just because.
Sounds like I need a car show, actually.
Yeah. Probably. You had Automuse. Are you still?
Yeah, so my dear friend Liz used to be the motoring editor of the Herald. We had a lot of fun in 2019, 2020 with cars at Parihoa and some great product launches. And we've both just been living our lives a little bit these last few years, but we often talk about I just wanted to write stories on cars, and Liz saw that in me, and she would edit my work, and we'd get all the latest and greatest, and that was fun.
Yeah. So it's funny, a couple of things. My alternate career would have been the one that Jeremy Clarkson has. Because he's the journalist, writer, and essentially a vlogger as well, but with supercharged and behind it with the BBC show. So we share that in common as well, because it ticks all those boxes. Travel, entertainment, bit of sarcasm, kind of that sort of thing as well. It's funny because Tina and I were having a chat before this, and I said, "This is the question. What do you think Matt's going to say?" And we both at the same time said, "Cult leader."
A cult leader. Do you know what? Actually, one of my employees. Anna, who actually is a Kiwi and she lives in New Zealand. She used to call me the cult leader, actually.
There we go.
Yeah. She used to call me the cult
So there's a common thread. So, don't make that dead and buried as an idea. It's still definitely an option. MC3, MC4 could be the cult leader. And I don't mean the Jim Jeffries drink the Kool-Aid kind of way. Jeffries, he's the comedian, Jim Brown. I mean more in the positive kind of movement, forming something that's meaningful and not egotistical.
I was always one of those people, and I still am, who will rally a lot of support for an idea, but the idea might not always be right. So those who know me more can often shoot down the idea, and I realise actually it wasn't a particularly good idea. But back to the car show and the cars, I also think that cars are relatable for everyone. They're multi-generational, multi-socio-demographic. And, when we've been looking at building this network, I just didn't want to open up a social media platform that you like and you think you're in the network, or, you just come into the platform. I actually literally wanted to get out there and recruit the people for this network and do it through cars and experiences. I often like when you're on hiking trails and you say hello to people and you're a hiker and you think, God, some of the most amazing people in the world are out in mountains, in back places. So I think looking for good energy through passions is a great place to start, to meet new people and to connect networks.
Yeah. And my final thought about cars, by the way, is that, and I grew up in between kind of low socioeconomic demographic, but also rural property in Auckland. And so what a car represented, you grew up in rural New South Wales, what a car represented, and it's a word that is both also really important to both of us, is freedom. It was freedom.
Yeah.
Because of his ability to get into something that could transport you hundreds of kilometres over the course of a day. And so that gave you just a really strong connection with freedom. I remember when I got my first push bike, I was 5 or 6 years old, and that represented the first step in freedom. And then as soon as I could get my driver's licence, I did, 15 years old, and I bought a car within a year to just get that sense of freedom. So I think that's one of the reasons that we feel such a connection with them, and then they turn into these things of beauty and passion and style and all those sorts of amazing things as well.
I think you're absolutely right. I recently took my 1985 Land Rover Defender. I actually have 7 Defenders, a bit of a family. But I took one to the road that I've done up, and it's not a fast car, but in the back of it, I've got my single mattress, my fridge, and 2 satellite panels, 2 solar panels on the front to charge the batteries. And honestly, it just makes me so happy to go exploring in that, and free camping and just being amongst the travelers.
Yeah.
And I realized when I was doing that, I'm a new arrival in New Zealand. I've been here for a decade, but this country's beautiful, and traveling makes me feel good. So it was a real clue for me. Again, under the rainbow of passions, what to spend more time doing.
Yeah, I hear you. Matt, what a pleasurable conversation to have. I'm really rapt that we could get to do this today. I'm very grateful for you to come on the show. Thank you for your candour and openness and a whole bunch of wisdom that you've shared with the viewers and the listeners as well. And I can't wait to see MC3 unfold before us. So thanks for coming on the show, Matt.
Oh, thanks, Josh. Real pleasure to be here. Great to see you doing this. I think this is a fantastic thing for you to put your energy into. A lot of people can learn, and I look forward to hearing more of your future guests as well. I know we've been down some vortexes in our discussions today, but I think you've got to be real. And I just want to share my experiences as authentically as I can, and to also remind everyone listening that you are also unlimited. You can do whatever you put your mind to. And I had no plan, and I still have no plan. And that's the beauty of all this.
I love this.
Thanks
very much, Matt.